The night was colder than anyone had expected. Snow fell quietly over the small town of Ashford, blanketing the streets in silence. Inside the maternity ward of St. Mary's Hospital, the fluorescent lights flickered faintly, and the nurses moved through the halls with the calm rhythm of routine. But at 2:43 a.m., that rhythm broke. Nurse Olivia Hart was finishing her shift when she heard it, a faint, trembling cry echoing from the entrance hall. She frowned, thinking at first it was the wind, but the sound came again, fragile yet desperate. She followed the echo until she saw it, a small wicker basket placed by the hospital doors, snow melting slowly around it. Her breath caught. Inside the basket was a baby boy wrapped in a pale blue blanket, his tiny fists shaking in the cold. A folded note rested on top of his chest. Olivia's hands trembled as she picked it up. Only 3 words were written in delicate handwriting. "Please forgive me." The security cameras showed nothing but darkness outside. Whoever had left the child was gone, vanished into the snow-covered streets. Olivia held the baby close, whispering softly, "You're safe now, little one." She called for help, and within minutes the hospital's small emergency team gathered around, each moved by the sight of this abandoned life. Days turned into weeks as social services searched for any trace of the mother. No one came forward. The baby was given a temporary name, Baby Ash, after the town where he was found. He spent the first months of his life in the neonatal care unit, surrounded by nurses who took turns holding him, feeding him, and humming lullabies to keep him calm. But as much as they loved him, they all knew he couldn't stay there forever. When Baby Ash turned 1 year old, a couple came to visit the orphanage. Their names were Michael and Sarah Turner, both in their early 30s, childless after years of failed attempts. Sarah's eyes filled with tears the moment she saw the boy sitting on the playroom floor building towers out of wooden blocks. He looked up at her with curious blue eyes, the same color as the blanket he'd been found in. Something inside her shifted instantly. "That's him," she whispered to her husband. "That's our son." A few months later, the adoption was finalized. They named him Ethan. And from that day on, the little boy who had entered the world unwanted found a home filled with laughter, bedtime stories, and unconditional love. He learned to call Sarah Mommy and Michael Dad. He learned to trust the warmth of a hug, the safety of a familiar voice, and the comfort of belonging. Yet even as he grew, the faint whisper of that snowy night seemed to follow him, not as a sound but as a feeling deep inside. Sometimes when Sarah tucked him into bed, he would ask softly, "Mommy, where did I come from?" And every time she would smile through her heartache and say, "From the stars, my love. You came from the stars." Years later, he would remember those words, because no matter how far we run from our beginnings, the past always finds its way home. But on that first night, as baby Ethan slept peacefully in his new crib, the note, "Please forgive me," was tucked carefully inside a keepsake box in Sarah's drawer. She never mentioned it again, and yet somehow, she knew that one day, those words would come back to haunt them all. If this story has already touched your heart, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Ethan grew up in the Turner household, surrounded by warmth, the kind that seeps into the walls of a home and never leaves. Their house on Maple Avenue was modest, with yellow curtains and a small garden that Sarah tended every morning. There was always the smell of freshly baked bread and laughter echoing through the rooms. From the outside, Ethan's childhood looked perfect, and for the most part, it was. He was a bright, curious boy who loved drawing superheroes and asking endless questions. His adoptive parents adored him. Every milestone, every scraped knee, every school play. Sarah kept an album of his life, filling it with photos, locks of hair, and hand-drawn birthday cards. But beneath that loving surface, there was always a quiet space inside Ethan's heart that no one could fill. It wasn't sadness. Not exactly. It was more like a question that had no answer. He first noticed it at school, when other kids brought in family trees for a class project. While they proudly connected branches with grandparents, cousins, and aunts, Ethan's paper remained almost empty. He had his mom and dad, but what came before them was a mystery. When his teacher gently asked if he needed help, Ethan just smiled and said, "Mine started a little differently." That night, as he sat in bed, he turned to Sarah and asked, "Mom, was I born here?" She froze for a moment, brushing his hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "You were born here in Ashford." "But who was my first mom?" he whispered. The question broke something inside her. She had always known this day would come, the day when curiosity would outweigh comfort. "I don't know, Ethan," she answered, holding him close. "But whoever she was, she must have loved you very much." Ethan accepted the words, but they never fully satisfied him. Love, to him, was something you showed, not something you proved by disappearing. Still, he grew up grateful, channeling that silent ache into determination. He studied hard, excelled in art, and became known for his gentle nature. When he was 16, he found the note by accident. He had gone searching for batteries in his mother's drawer when he came across a small wooden box locked but easy to open. Inside were baby photos, hospital records, and the folded paper with 3 faint words, "Please forgive me." His breath stopped. He read it over and over, the handwriting shaky but elegant. It was real. For years he had imagined his beginning as a blank page. Now that page had a voice that begged forgiveness. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The words replayed in his mind, whispering through the dark. Forgive me. For what? For leaving him? For saving him? He didn't know. He just knew that whoever wrote it still existed somewhere out there. He thought about telling Sarah and Michael, but something in his heart told him not to. He didn't want to hurt them. They had given him everything: a home, love, safety. To question that now felt like betrayal. So he kept the note a secret, tucking it back exactly where he found it. As the years passed, life moved forward. Ethan graduated from college, became a designer, and moved into a small apartment in central London. He had friends, a steady job, and a peaceful life. But every now and then, he would wake in the middle of the night from a dream he couldn't explain. A woman's silhouette standing in the snow, leaving something behind. He never saw her face. He never heard her voice. Only the sound of footsteps fading away into the cold. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, more than 28 years after that snowy night, there was a knock at his door. When he opened it, his entire world froze. She stood in the doorway, trembling slightly, clutching the strap of a worn leather bag. Her coat was damp from the rain, her hair streaked with gray, and her eyes, those pale blue eyes, looked achingly familiar. "Ethan Turner?" she asked, her voice soft but unsteady. He nodded slowly, unsure if he should speak. She gave a nervous smile that faded almost immediately. "You don't know me," she began, her throat tightening. "But I know you." The air between them thickened. Ethan felt an uneasy flutter in his stomach. The woman's gaze dropped to the floor as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I've carried this for a long time," she whispered. "I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage to give it to you." Ethan hesitated but stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in. The woman looked relieved, but also frightened, like someone walking into a memory she wasn't ready to face. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling as she placed the envelope on the coffee table. Ethan remained standing, arms crossed, his heart racing. "Who are you?" he finally asked. "My name is Margaret," she said softly. Then, after a pause that seemed to stretch forever, "I'm your mother." Ethan froze. The room fell completely silent, except for the ticking of a small clock on the wall. He almost laughed, part disbelief, part defense. "My mother?" he repeated. "That's impossible." "I know it's hard to believe," she said quickly, "but I have proof." She opened the envelope and slid out several papers, official documents, photos, even a hospital tag with faded ink. Ethan's eyes darted from one item to the next. The handwriting on the old note, "Please forgive me," was identical to the one on a birth certificate that read, "Ethan Hart, born December 12th, St. Mary's Hospital." His hands began to shake. The truth was right there, staring back at him. Margaret took a deep breath. "I've wanted to find you for years," she said. But I didn't know how. I didn't even know if you'd still be in England. I thought maybe it was too late. Ethan couldn't move. 1,000 thoughts collided in his mind. Anger, confusion, disbelief. Too late for what? He snapped. To explain why you left me in a hospital like garbage? The words cut deeper than he meant them to, but he didn't take them back. Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. You have every right to hate me, she said, her voice trembling. But I didn't abandon you because I didn't love you. I did it because I did. Ethan turned away, gripping the back of a chair to steady himself. That doesn't make sense. I know, she whispered. It didn't make sense to me either at the time. But your father, he was dangerous, Ethan. I was 19. He was controlling, violent. I tried to protect you. Leaving you at that hospital was the only way I could be sure you'd survive. Ethan's chest tightened. The story sounded like something from a movie, tragic, improbable. But her eyes, there was something honest in them, something painfully real. He sat down slowly, still unsure whether he wanted to listen or throw her out. Why now? He asked. Why come after almost 30 years? Margaret looked down at her hands. Because I'm sick, she said quietly. And I couldn't leave this world without seeing you, without telling you the truth. Silence again. Outside, the rain tapped gently on the window. Ethan stared at her, his mind a storm of emotions he couldn't name. Anger fought with curiosity. Resentment tangled with a strange, reluctant empathy. Finally, he whispered, You can't just show up after all this time and expect me to forgive you. I don't expect that, she said. I only hoped you'd let me try. For the first time, Ethan noticed her hands. Thin, fragile, scarred with time. She looked like someone who had lived a lifetime of regret. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that realization hurt him even more. The clock ticked again. One moment hung between them, an entire lifetime in a single breath. Then quietly, Ethan said, Tell me everything. Margaret's voice was fragile, like something that could break with a single wrong word. She looked down at her trembling hands and began to speak. I was young, too young, she said quietly. I met your father when I was 17. He was charming, older, said all the right things. For a while I thought he was my whole world. She smiled bitterly. But then the charm faded and what was left was fear. Ethan listened in silence, his jaw tense. He didn't know what to feel. Every sentence she spoke peeled back another layer of a life he never knew existed. His life before it began. When I found out I was pregnant, Margaret continued, he changed completely. He didn't want a baby. He told me to get rid of you. When I refused, he became violent. I tried to run, but he found me. I remember hiding in a friend's basement for 2 days praying he wouldn't show up. Her voice cracked. When you were born, I knew I couldn't keep you safe. I didn't even have a home anymore. So I waited until the hospital was quiet and I left you there with a note. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Ethan closed his eyes. The image formed in his mind. The cold hallway, the basket, the snow. He had replayed that scene 1,000 times in his imagination. But now it wasn't a mystery. It was a memory that belonged to someone real. Margaret wiped her eyes and looked at him. Not a day went by that I didn't think of you. I used to walk by St. Mary's just to stand outside the doors. I'd watch other mothers carrying their babies and wonder if you were still out there, if you were happy, if you ever forgave me. Ethan leaned back, his chest heavy. And what made you think showing up now would fix any of that? It won't, she said simply. But I had to try. I'm dying, Ethan. Stage 4 cancer. I don't want pity. I just needed to see you before I go, to know that you lived. The words hit him like a blow. He felt the room spin slightly, his anger colliding with guilt, then dissolving into something he couldn't name. He wanted to hate her, but how could he hate someone who had carried this pain alone for nearly 30 years? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the faint sound of city traffic. Margaret reached into her bag again and pulled out a small silver locket. She held it out to him. This was yours, she said. I couldn't leave it that night. It was the only thing of mine I kept. But it belongs to you. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a faded photograph of a teenage girl holding a baby in her arms. The girl's eyes were unmistakably his own. He swallowed hard. "You really did love me, didn't you?" he whispered. Margaret's eyes shimmered. "More than anything. But love doesn't always look like what it should. Sometimes it means letting go." For the first time that night, Ethan felt the walls he had built for years begin to crack. The anger softened, replaced by something closer to sorrow. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said honestly. "I don't need you to," she replied. "Just don't spend your life angry at me. You've built something beautiful. Don't let my mistakes take that away." She stood slowly, her body weak, but her voice steady. "I'll go now. You've heard what you needed." Ethan didn't stop her. He couldn't. He watched as she walked to the door, her steps slow and deliberate. But just before she reached the threshold, she turned and said, "You have my eyes, Ethan. Every time you look in the mirror, know that I'm there." And then she was gone. Ethan sat there for a long time, the locket still open in his palm, the rain starting again outside. For the first time in his life, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of questions he wasn't sure he was ready to answer. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The apartment felt different, as if her presence still lingered in the air, a soft echo of everything she had said. The locket rested on his nightstand, glinting faintly in the light of dawn. He must have stared at it for hours, tracing the edges of the photo with his thumb, trying to understand the woman who had turned his life upside down in a single evening. By morning, the rain had stopped. London streets shimmered under the pale light, the world beginning its quiet routine again. But inside Ethan's chest, nothing felt routine anymore. Every part of him was at war. His anger, his confusion, his compassion. For 28 years he had imagined the woman who abandoned him as a ghost from a cold winter night. Now that ghost had a face, a voice, and a story that hurt more than he ever expected. He didn't call her. Not that day. Not the next. Days turned into weeks, and he tried to lose himself in work. But each time he saw a mother holding her child, something inside him stirred. He wondered what Margaret was doing, if she was okay, if she was still alive. One Sunday afternoon, while walking through Hyde Park, he passed a woman reading on a bench, her hand resting gently on a stroller. The baby laughed, that innocent, pure sound that erases everything dark for a moment. Ethan stopped, frozen. He realized that life had given him what Margaret had always wanted for him: safety, peace, and a chance to love without fear. He went home, opened the drawer where he'd hidden her envelope, and took out the hospital note one last time. "Please forgive me." The ink had faded, but the words were alive. Forgiveness, he thought, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about refusing to let it poison the future. That night, Ethan made a decision. He searched online for the hospice name written on one of Margaret's papers. It didn't take long to find her. When he arrived, the nurse at the reception smiled softly as if she already knew who he was. "Room 12, she said. "She's been waiting for you." Ethan walked down the hallway, his heart pounding louder with each step. The room smelled faintly of lavender. Margaret lay in bed, frail but awake, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw him. "You came," she whispered, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. He smiled weakly. "I wasn't sure I would. I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't." He sat beside her and took her hand. It was cold, but when she squeezed it, he felt warmth, the kind that only truth could bring. They talked for hours, about her life, about his, about everything that had been lost and everything that had been found. There were no apologies left, no anger left to burn, only two souls trying to find peace before time ran out. As the sun set outside the window, painting the sky in soft orange, Margaret whispered, "I dreamed about this moment. You don't have to say anything. Just, thank you for coming." Ethan leaned closer, his voice breaking. "I forgive you, Mom." A tear slipped down her cheek, followed by a fragile smile. "That's all I ever wanted." She passed away 2 days later. At her funeral, Ethan stood alone by her grave, the locket hanging around his neck. He didn't cry. Not because he wasn't sad, but because he finally understood. The woman who had left him in the snow had also given him the chance to live, to love, to become the man he was standing there that day. As he turned to leave, a soft wind brushed against his face, carrying the faint scent of lavender. For the first time, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt found. Later, he would share his story with others, about the woman who had walked away to save him, and the son who walked back to forgive her. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's letting go. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. Because love, even when lost, can always find its way home.